Hi everyone, it's Andrea. I'm just gonna, I know it's right on time, but I'm just gonna give people 1 or 2 more minutes to trickle in, and then we'll really begin talking. So hold tight, and we'll get started shortly. It looks like most of the trickling in that I'm seeing online has halted a little bit. Can someone on the webinar really quickly just type in the chat that you can hear me all right and that you can see my screen? Awesome. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Yay, a ton of people. So thank you guys for taking some time to join me today and talk about the new eReviews process within EnerGov. What I hope to accomplish in today's webinar, we have about an hour and a half scheduled, and I want to leave room for some questions at the end. But what I think would be great is that if each of you could walk away with a high-level understanding of how the new eReviews process will work and some steps on how you might be able to start moving towards this process in your jurisdiction. We've been developing this new eReviews work for a little bit over a year now, and there's a lot of setup in there and nuances in there that we could go into depth on and be lost for a good day. So I am going to try to keep it a little bit high level, but we will have some good training documents available to people. We'll do some deeper dives if you're able to make it to connect. And then obviously when you're able to move to this new eReview solution, EnerGov will be there to kind of help you with that as well. And we'll probably have some future webinars that dive into these different areas a little bit more specifically along the way too. I was looking at the group of people in the attendees list, and there's quite a few of you who have been involved in this eReviews analysis and user testing, and me frantically sending you guys emails about your business process. So I do want to say thank you to all of those who have helped contribute throughout the way, because this is really something that clients and users help develop more than anything else. So to kind of set the stage of this new eReviews process, I want to start by talking about some of our personas. If you're not used to the term persona in the world in general, someone is saying music is distracting. There's not music, so I'm not sure what that's coming from. But there's no music going on. Personas in EnerGov, though, or what we use personas for, is to help our development team understand really the different players who are involved in using a certain component of the software and what their main goals and objectives are. And the reason why I want to show a couple of those to you today, these are very high level, is just as we're going through this process of electronic plan reviews, I think it can be easy to get lost on who's doing this part of it and who's doing this part of it. So we'll use this as a foundation to walk through the process more than anything else. And these personas are kind of funny. The first one, just to help reiterate that, is Bob Builder. So really creative name right there. But the idea is that Bob Builder, to you guys, he would probably represent the customer. It could be in terms of a contractor, a homeowner, an architect or engineer. But their main goal is to get the city to approve their work so that they can continue with their process. And obviously, when you're talking about Bob Builder working in a paper world versus in an electronic world, I think his main benefits, you guys have probably heard over and over again, is that it means they don't have to come into the city and find a parking spot and drop off those plans and spend the money in printing them. They can kind of do that from the comfort of their office or home if they need to. So that's Bob Builder. The next persona that we have is PAM Coordinator, and this is the Plan Review Coordinator. To us, and for me personally, when I was given the eReviews project to take on, I didn't really think much about this role in terms of I didn't realize that it was there. It's a little bit of a hidden persona, and it might even be in your jurisdiction too, because while you have people who fulfill this role, they're not necessarily titled as a Plan Review Coordinator. Not everybody has the budget to have one role to help coordinate plan reviews. So it's often the permit tech who does this, or a reviewer, or a review manager who helps with this whole process, which is why I think that this persona has gotten a little bit lost in the past. But their main role is to help coordinate the process in terms of telling Bob, this is what you need to submit to us, making sure that those requirements are met before the whole review team gets to look at them, and then making sure the reviewers get their reviews, that they get the papers that they need, and then once everything's done, consolidating that information together and sending that back out to Bob Builder. So that's a little bit about PAM Coordinator. And then the last persona that we'll cover through the process today is Patrick Reviewer. And this is probably the most traditional persona we think about. And I know that there's varying levels of comfort for the reviewers to move to an electronic process versus their paper process. But they just want a way to easily see the data that they need and enter their comments easily as well. Okay. So when we started work on this development, and we're taking a look at what electronic plan reviews means, I think there's this thought, and this picture helps embody that for me, which is, well, the problem that's out there is that a lot of jurisdictions use papers to complete a review process for these building plans. And when I look at this stuff, I don't know what you guys see, but to me it seems really cluttered. It gives me a little bit of anxiety because I just feel like, oh my gosh, if I were sitting there, I know I feel like I would lose something. And it just doesn't feel very organized. And it also feels a little bit outdated. I think that, you know, that's a personal opinion, but I think to me it just seems like, hey, shouldn't we be doing things electronically right now? And I know that from working with a number of you all throughout the years that there's a lot of overhead to this too with the paper process. There's a lot of storage that needs out there as well, just to maintain these documents. So it's very easy for me to come in without having done this role and say, well, the problem that our eReviews product needs to solve is taking this paper world and making it electronic, and the desk would look cleaner, and it would be more modern, and then we're good to go. And I think that what I just said is somewhat wrong. And the reason is that as I've worked with more users and as I've talked to more people, while this desk looks really chaotic to me, I can actually probably guarantee you that the person sitting there, if you ask them to find a document, they would be able to find it right away. They're able to tell where these plans are in the process and how to route them out. And over years, there have been processes built into these paper documents to help make sure that they're routed and done. So when we take it and we say, well, let's put this into an electronic plan review process, and we don't have that supporting infrastructure in terms of how to actually manage these files, when that goes away, I think that that's where problems arise. So just to kind of help illustrate that as well, this is kind of thinking of if you aren't using an eReviews process right now, thinking of the paper process, but also I think just when we try to move it electronic, the different challenges that come up to it. And it starts pretty simple with someone wanting to submit a group of plans to the jurisdiction for review. And we just talked about those three main personas and how they interact with this. But you know that what I just talked about with those are oversimplified personas. In Bob Builder's world, in the contractor's world, before he even submits the plans to the jurisdiction, he's gone back and forth on his own end with different architects and engineers and owners, trying to make sure that things are right. And so there's a lot more people involved in that process than Bob Builder. And also from your perspective, you don't just have one customer who follows you train once and they then know all the rules and know how to do everything. You're dealing with a huge mass of people who have different challenges that come along with them. For Patrick Reviewer, I think even for me in terms of designing or helping to design this new solution for eReviews, it's very clear to see that not only are the different individuals have different preferences in terms of how they mark up plans and how they work on things, but different departments have slightly different takes on how to complete a plan review. And it's a group of people reviewing the plans, not just one person. So there's some additional complexity there. And then PAM coordinator, not only does she have other jobs that she's doing, this is usually just part of her task, but there's often a rotating schedule and multiple different staff members who help fill that role too. So you take something that's simple like submitting a document and these three people that interact with it, and it's already a little bit more complicated than people realize. And then you add to it all of these different pieces of the workflow that need, or different pieces of the process that need to be in place. So you need to make sure the fees are paid, that the application is complete, that the deadlines are met. You need to communicate back and forth throughout that whole process. And as you're doing that, the instinct is to create this kind of complicated workflow around how to manage all of that. But I think what ultimately happens is we all know from kind of basic mechanics that the more complicated the process, the more room there is for something to break or for there to be an error in it. And some of the things in our early discovery of eReviews that came about were questions that people had about, you know, like, how do I manage my workload or my tasks on a day-to-day basis? How long do I have to complete a review, or how long has this review been in the review process? Am I the holdup, and am I the thing that people are waiting for, or is it the customer that we're waiting on for something? So there's a lot of questions throughout this whole process that exists today. And what the new eReview solution really offers is taking that kind of chaotic workflow that exists today and putting a true end-to-end business process that supports the whole electronic plan review process for your jurisdiction. So in the past, I think our approach to this had been more along, well, you can submit the files to us online, so we have the files, and then you can do your markups and put in those results, and that's electronic plan reviews. And what this new eReviews does is take into account all of the processes that you guys have established working with paper plans and taking that into the electronic world, but in a way that creates an end-to-end streamlined process for electronic plan reviews. This process, I have worked with a number of people, and I forget who said it, but I was kind of getting stressed out in terms of how to simplify it at one point, and someone brought up to me who kind of fills the role of a case manager or the plan review coordinator. She said, you know what, you just kind of have to expect that reviews come with some level of chaos. So while that's not our goal, we want to eliminate the chaos as much as possible. We do have ways to take this kind of streamlined approach and scale it up or down to meet your needs a little bit more in terms of the different resubmittals and things that can go back and forth throughout that whole process. So the biggest thing, and I know I've been talking a lot kind of setting this up, to me the biggest takeaway is that this new eReviews is not just about marking up files and getting the files in and getting them back and forth. It's really about how you manage letting someone know that those new files are there, that you have steps in place before you start the review process, and then helping to coordinate that at the end of the review process as well. So those pieces I think are really strong with this new eReviews process. And then we're also have really emphasized throughout this whole process ways that you can communicate effectively between those three different personas who are involved in it as well. So what I'm going to do is jump into kind of a sneak peek. Once again, the goal is that high level, this is how eReviews functions in this new development that we've been working on. What I'm about to show you is a screenshot of CSS, but the reason why I wanted to just take a minute and talk to you about it first is that we're working with CSS with some new design work in there. So the screenshots that I'm about to show you aren't what CSS looks like today, but that shouldn't matter that much. The same functionality is there as what I'm showing you, but it just looks a little bit different. So if that's confusing to you, that's why. This whole process really starts, or could really start with Bob Builder, going on to CSS, going online and saying, I want to submit my application for a permitter plan. So he's going and doing that. And throughout his application, which you can see up here that CSS is moving in the direction of, during the apply process, making that more into a stepper instead of just kind of a long list of things that you have to fill out. But one of his steps as he's applying for that permitter plan is that, first of all, you can see the different file requirements that are being asked for. And this is something that, especially when you all are working on implementing this new eReviews, we'll dive into more, but we have a lot of robust options in here for you guys to say that these are the different files that are required and to provide instructions for those as well. So Bob can clearly see the application requirements, and he can easily upload the files directly to that requirement. If you guys on the phone are familiar with the current eReviews, something that's a little bit difficult there is that people have to know to open up that separate eReviews portal to submit files there. And then it's not really clear what the requirements are in the eReviews portal. People just upload files and then guess at what category they fall into. So this kind of reverses that around. During your application process in CSS, you are uploading the files that will be routed through plan review. And you're uploading directly to that requirement instead of uploading a file and then trying to say what category it is. So Bob can clearly see those requirements, and he can finish his application process online. We're going to move now. This is a look at what Case Manager looks like. This is an HTML back office component. And we'll dig into some of the functionality here in a second, but the biggest thing to note in here is that this Pam review, the plan review coordinator, when she logs in and she goes into Case Manager in the morning, and this would be one of her main screens that she's in EnerGov on a daily basis. In here, she will, as soon as Bob submits those files online, Pam will receive a notification that there's new files to review. And she's given this task letting her know that she needs to take action. So this is kind of that just-in-time task letting someone know that they need to do work that is now in their court, or else they'll be the roadblock. So Pam gets that notification, and just kind of by clicking on it and digging into it to see more information, she will be able to see all of the files that are associated to that permit or plan case, and she will also be able to see a clear distinction of which files are new. In this case, all of them really would have been new because Bob just filled out his application. But you see the new files that were submitted, something that people loved a lot during user testing, so I'm just pointing it out now, is that we've included the upload date and time of every file and who uploaded that file as well. So you have some really great insight into the timing of when those files were uploaded. And we've also given a couple of different views in here that Pam can manage those files in. So this is a list view. You get a little bit more data in this grid of those different files. But then she can also switch to a tile view where she can manage files from that perspective as well. So there's a few options in there to determine how she wants to look at these files. I just got a question that came in that said, is Bob responsible for the naming convention of the files? And that's come up a lot. So what we tried to work towards is that I feel like you guys can implement in your jurisdiction naming conventions and do training on how you want people to name the files. But the biggest thing that we uncovered is that as long as people are uploading the files to the right requirement, it's not as big of a deal. And we know that people aren't going to always upload the right files to the right requirements. So in this view, when Pam is looking at it, she can change and she can say, well, you uploaded this Duluth County building plan to my landscape plans, but I really need this in the building plan. So she can change that from in here. And we are also going to be supporting the ability to change the name of the file in the back office of EnerGov too. So while we're not enforcing the name of the file online, you can come in here from Pam's perspective and you can rename the file if you'd like to. So as she's looking at these files, she might notice that, you know what, they did meet the requirements, but they did something wrong. They're missing important pieces of the file, and I'd rather have that corrected now before we have the whole review team take a look at those files. So she's able to go in and she can select multiple files and say, I'm going to reject this file, and here's what's specifically wrong with it and what you need to resubmit to us. So she can put really clear instructions in here in terms of what's wrong. In this example, it seems like someone didn't include signatures, and it was an incorrect file that was accidentally uploaded. So she's able to go in and say something's wrong with this, and that essentially will complete her task. Now, one of the big points in this whole process is being able to easily notify each other and let people know when something is in their queue. So when she does this, it's actually going to be in an email. This next screenshot looks a little bit fancier, but when she does this, Bob will get an email telling him that there's something from this that the city is asking him for. So he's notified. The phone is in here just so you guys know, because we would love for this to be available through text message as well. So that's something that we're looking at in the future too. But regardless, Bob gets an email telling him there's something that the city's asking him for. Real quick, I had another question come in. Are these screenshots showing the back end of eReviews, the back office of EnerGov? These last couple of screenshots, like these ones that I'm showing right here, those are the new eReviews, the back office of EnerGov that will be available in HTML. Okay. All right, so Bob gets an email telling him there's something that the city is asking him for. And so he can log into the online portal, and when he does, he's going to get very clear notifications telling him that there is an incomplete or an incorrect file, and it is up to him. It is his responsibility to go in and re-upload the correct files to it. So he can click on that, and when he does, he'll automatically be taken to the area where he needs to re-upload his plans to. So he'll be able to come in here, he will be able to see the instructions that Pam has left him, and he will be able to upload the correct file from that point. Okay. So Bob now did his task. It's back in the city's court, and Pam, very similar process to what we were looking at a minute ago. She's, you know, a couple of days have passed maybe, a lot of applications have come and gone on her desk, and she's not really thinking about this Bob contractor anymore. She's just proceeding with her day. But then once again, as soon as Bob submits this files back into her, she's able to go in. She gets another task that says there's new files to review. She can look at those files again and see if this time they meet those requirements. Something I didn't get a chance to show you the last time is that in here, you're also able to actually open up the documents directly from this task as well. So you can open up that full view of the document too if you need to. Okay, so she's looked at that. She's seeing the new requirements, and she says, we now meet these requirements. So from here, within a click of a button, she can really start the whole review process, but I'm going to show you this in a little bit more depth as well. So if she wanted to see who's actually doing the reviews and make sure that that's all aligned before she starts, she could jump into that task, and she'll essentially be able to receive the submittal. And in here, she'll be able to change the user, make something required, change the priority of something, change the due dates, etc. So she's really setting up the review very similar to how you would in the workflow of EnerGov today. When she does this and is complete with this task and is really starting those reviews, it will start the whole Bluebeam session process, and those reviewers will be notified that they have reviews assigned to them. So real quick, I want to just take a minute to talk about Bluebeam and Bluebeam sessions. So that we're clear on a few things. I get asked, I think the most common question that I get asked about Bluebeam is what license am I required to have in order to use this integration? And the answer to that is Studio Prime. It's called Studio Prime in review, but Studio Prime is the key word of what you need there. Bluebeam Sessions is supported in other licenses of Bluebeam, but in order to use Bluebeam with a third party, which would be EnerGov, to actually get that integration point for what we're doing, you need Studio Prime for that. And there is a question online: is can you use Acrobat? For this new process and this piece of it where I'm showing that it creates this Bluebeam session and that's how you do the markups in it, that piece of it, we are right now only supporting Bluebeam sessions. You can still use Acrobat to look at the files and do markups, but you're going to lose some of the functionality that I'm just about to cover here. When Pam gets that task in saying that there's new files for her to look at, she'll be able to choose which files to include in the session. So we have included a lot of options as you're setting up file requirements for the public to submit files to you. We've added a lot of configuration in there where you can say what file types you allow. So you can really allow whatever you're comfortable with, but in terms of what you send to Bluebeam for the Bluebeam session, it needs to be a PDF. So that's one thing to keep in mind. All of the reviewers who are on that submittal will be invited to join that session. And also, if later in the review you reassign that review to someone else, that new person will also be invited to join the session. A best practice, at least for this first version of the integration and new reviews that we're working with, is going to be that we have one active submittal in the workflow at a time. So a few jurisdictions out there will have a submittal for like their building department, their fire department, and their planning department, and they could all be happening concurrently. And using Bluebeam sessions and just kind of trying to get a simplified process in here, we've gone with the route of saying try to make that one active submittal in the workflow at a time. Now, we will still support if you have that submittal in the workflow and it fails, and then you have a resubmittal come in, that's fine. We just don't want more than one submittal actively being worked on at a time on that permit or plan case. If you're not familiar with Bluebeam or Bluebeam sessions, this is really something that I feel like our clients were the ones saying, hey guys, we need to do something with Bluebeam sessions. It's really cool, and there's a lot of really great tools in there, and we need to leverage it. And Bluebeam, I think, in terms of the building, engineering, architecture industry, I feel like Bluebeam is the preferred vendor in that spot as well. So I think it makes working a little bit with your customers a little bit easier too. Some benefits of Bluebeam, specifically about Bluebeam sessions, is that it allows real-time collaboration, so you don't need to check a file in or out. You can see other people's markups, but your markups are fully protected. They do have tools in there. It's kind of like when you put a Word document in comment mode where you can comment on each other's notes, but your actual notes and markups are protected. If for some reason you lose internet connectivity, you can still continue with your markups. They have a lot of really great markup and measurement tools, and some of the things that they have in there that people really seem to like is the ability to compare your documents. So you can go in and say, well, this was the V1 on it, and now let me do a side-by-side comparison of V2, and you can see what changes had been made. And then you can also use Bluebeam on an iPad as well. So let me catch up. There are a few questions I'm going to try to take a break and look at. So one question is, will there be the ability to combine or split files that an applicant submitted, and how you want to manage that? There will be, I think it will be a little bit manual for right now, but there will be a way to do that. And also once you have it in the session, you can kind of split and work with the files in there a little bit too. Plan review, is there anything that shows it was resubmitted? Yes, there is a way that you can see that this was resubmitted. I don't know if I have that in a screenshot, but I will try to reference that later if I can. Yes, so in terms of Acrobat and Bluebeam sessions and what you have to use, everything up until this point that I've talked about, you can use without using Bluebeam. But this is very, very much the path that we're going on, is that Bluebeam sessions is what reviewers would use to do the concurrent review piece of it. So that's very much the direction we're going in. If for some reason you decided not to use Bluebeam or Bluebeam sessions for that, you would have people be able to access those files and put markups on it, but the problem you would run into there would be the real-time collaboration. Do you have to be in the same session to do the comparison? So what we are going to do is that those files have to be in the same session to do the comparison tools. That's where you can do the overlays and things like that. So when a V2 comes in, we will allow the user to have some control over what gets sent to that session, but the idea is that you can send the previous files back to that session so that you can do the comparison tools in the same session. Can multiple reviewers' comments be exported to a review letter? Yes, I will show that to you in a few minutes. So a lot of questions around Bluebeam, and we'll try to work with you guys and with Bluebeam on providing some more detail around this. But kind of going back to the process a little bit. So we've just Pam looked at those new files. She says we're ready to start the review process, and that in turn kicks off Bluebeam sessions. So what will happen is that Bluebeam actually automatically sends out an email when you've been invited to a session. This is an example of what that email looks like. And we were able to add some custom text in here so that when the reviewer gets this, they can see the permit or plan number that it's associated to in EnerGov, and you're also able to see the different reviews you're assigned to and the due dates of that. So from Patrick's world, he really hasn't been involved in this process so far, unless he's also the case manager, but he hasn't really been involved up until now, and he's just going about his day doing his reviews. So he'll get this new email that comes in saying you've been assigned a new review to work with. This is what Bluebeam looks like in specifically Bluebeam sessions. So Patrick will be able to see all the different files that were added to that session, and he can click on each of them and kind of work his way through. And he is also able to use a custom toolbox to make markups. So the custom toolbox is optional for you guys. It's just something that, and I'm not the biggest Bluebeam expert in the world, but I have worked with them quite a bit over the last year. And this seems to resonate very much with Patrick Reviewer himself, because one of his main goals that we're going back to, he just wants to really simply be able to enter in his comments. And Bluebeam is so great and has a lot of great tools to it, but using these custom toolboxes seem to be nice because you can kind of limit how many tools Patrick has available to him, and you can also do some pre-definition to it, like saying we want fire to all be in red and building to all be in blue, and kind of predefine that to make Patrick not have to make so many choices in terms of how to do the markups, and instead just focus on the content that he's creating instead. So Patrick's mostly doing his markups in Bluebeam. If you're using eReviews today, you're probably very used to the concept of I make a markup and then I have a correction or recommendation in EnerGov and I click apply, and those markups tie to that correction or recommendation. That does not exist in this new process anymore. So you make your markups in Bluebeam. I will show you in a second on what you can do in EnerGov. And then once that Bluebeam session closes, we will pull all of those markups back into EnerGov. But for Patrick, once again, simple is really important, and him having to apply those markups to different corrections or recommendations never seems to really resonate that well with that group of people. So in EnerGov itself, Patrick will also have a screen specifically designed for him called Manage My Reviews, which you guys who have been using EnerGov for a while are probably used to seeing this in. We have a Silverlight screen called that many use today called Manage My Reviews. And then we also have the eReview client, or the orange E that's on your desktop, that Patrick can go in and see all of his reviews there too. From this view, Patrick is able to see all of the reviews that are actively assigned to him and use this to prioritize his work a little bit more. So he'll be able to see what's overdue, what's upcoming due. He'll be able to sort and filter this list by the due date, by project information, by address, and various things in here as well. So he's able to use this in conjunction with Bluebeam to prioritize his work. And similar to the orange E or eReview client today, he can open up any of those reviews and immediately see more information about that permit or plan case. So this saves Patrick from having to dig through a bunch of different records in EnerGov to try to find information relevant to him. He can predominantly live in this screen and in Bluebeam to complete his work. Of course, if he does want to dig into the permit or plan case to see more information, then he has the option to do that as well. So let me catch up on a couple more questions and then I'll move on. So with eReviews, is Adobe still supported? The current eReviews product is still there, and that supports Adobe. I don't remember which version of it is best to use with that, but that product is there, that uses Adobe. But this product that I'm going through right now, that whole integration point where the reviewers are marking up reviews, we only support Bluebeam sessions for this piece of it right now. How can I assign a generic reviewer if you don't know who the reviewer will be during the time of intake? Same tools that we have in EnerGov today for that. It would be nice if long-term we could come up with something to say we want to assign this review to a group of people or to one person and then have them reassign it later. But we really haven't done that much to change that part of the process with new eReviews. And then there's a question, can the email that would be then be turned off that the reviewer just uses manage my reviews? We've explored that, and I think that able, I have not found a way to turn that off from Bluebeam. It's a Bluebeam thing, they're the ones who send it, and we, like I said, we're able to tailor it. So I don't know of a way to turn it off. However, you could probably train some people to put some rules on their email if you don't want it clogging their inbox, that it all goes to a folder and then they just use manage my reviews instead. Okay, so Patrick's out doing his reviews, and he has a bunch on his plate that he's working through. And meanwhile, we're going to kind of revisit Pam Coordinator for a minute. So Pam is, once again, has a lot of different things going across her desk, and new files, tasks are coming in, and new applications are coming in, and she's busy. Something, though, that she's able to see on her dashboard that, once again, hopefully she's logged into at least a couple of times a day to be managing her work from, is this area called 3 Upcoming. And we changed that title a little bit. It says 3 Upcoming Due. This is telling her, from that plan review coordinator perspective, out of all of the different submittals that she has started and that she's the overall case manager to, which ones of these have a due date that's approaching? And the main goal in here is that we all know that there's more difficult bob builders out there, there's more difficult contractors or customers who if you're late are going to be the ones who call, or if maybe they even call a couple of days before the submittal was supposed to be done, or maybe you just have some really good service level agreements and your managers are trying to make sure that nothing's overdue. So while Pam is busy and not really paying attention in the current system about what's upcoming due, here very easily on her dashboard she can see that there's 3 upcoming submittals that she's ultimately the coordinator for that have a due date approaching. And from here, in a couple of really simple clicks, she can dig into it and send an email out to that review team and say, hey guys, don't forget that this review is due in a couple of days. The contractor always emails me and I want to make sure that I have time to get everything together and send it back out to them. So she's able to create that message, making sure that the deadlines are met along the way. Which I think is a really cool thing that you don't really have insight into the eReview process or really anywhere in EnerGov today. So she sends out this email reminding people, and Patrick realizes, oh, wait a second, I remember I started looking at those plans and I actually did most of the plan review. I just forgot to put in my final corrections and comments and complete that review. So he can still use Manage My Reviews to put in corrections, recommendations, and conditions. He does not have to. That's up for you guys in your jurisdiction to decide, do you want people putting those notes directly on the file, and then do you need these other things referenced, or do you want to do one or the other, or a combination of both? Just as a side note in here, we have turned on or have created an option where if you have a department, let's say, that doesn't use recommendations, you can turn that off so that Patrick doesn't see recommendations here. And same with corrections or conditions. So you guys will be able to turn that on or off, and that's at the item review type level. So you guys can configure that. But in here, he can go in, he can add those corrections from the correction library, conditions or recommendations as well. And then he's also able to do this new thing that we heard quite a bit during the electronic plan review process, which makes a lot of sense. But if Patrick has gone in and he's marked up the plans and he's putting in corrections, he probably is the best person to ask in terms of, hey, what does Bob need to submit to you next time so that you have all of the files that you need. So Patrick will be able to go in here and look at the review files. This is optional. He doesn't have to do this if he doesn't want to. But he can go in and he can say, these are the 3 files out of everything I looked at and the different notes that I put on. These are the 3 files that I'm really requesting back for review. And that's from his perspective. And each one of the reviewers can put in the different files that they're requesting back from review. And I'll show you how that turns out in a second here. So when he's ready, Patrick will be able to say, I'm ready to complete this review. He'll be able to change the status of the review and put in any last-minute overall comments that he might want to about the review as well, and complete that. So he's off to his next review, and when it's time for Pam, when all of the different reviews are complete, or however you have that logic set up in EnerGov. So whatever in EnerGov right now causes that workflow action of the submittal to turn green or red, when that happens, Pam coordinator will get this new task, and it could be one of 2 different tasks, but it could be hey, this submittal has been approved, or is about to be approved, and we need you to kind of coordinate that at the end, or it's failed, and once again, we need you to coordinate that at the end as well. So she's able to get that new task on her dashboard, and dig into that and take a look at it. This is where I was talking about where you can see the different markups. So once all of the reviews are done and this task is generated, EnerGov is going to automatically close that Bluebeam session. And when we close that Bluebeam session, we're going to get those files back from Bluebeam. They will have the markups on it that all the different reviewers had entered. And then we will capture those markups in a grid here, where you'll be able to see what file that markup was applied to, the user who had added it, the text, and the date and time of that markup. For the markups that we're pulling back, based off of feedback from the current eReviews project, we are only going to pull back markups that have text on it. So if you just highlight something or draw a circle around something on the PDF, you won't see that in the grid. It's just anything that has text associated to it. So Pam will be able to see these different markups. She'll also be able to open up all of the files that came back and see that view of the markups as well. And she will remember how I was telling you that the reviewers can see the different files that the different people had gone in and said, hey, I'm requesting this file back and this file back and this file back for my plan review. So she will see essentially a grid of that information assembled here, where she can see, well, for the building plan, that's being requested back by these 2 people, and these are the departments they're in. And these are the instructions that those reviewers had given about what they're looking for on that new file to be resubmitted. This is not their whole markup letter or anything like this. This is really just saying, like, hey, don't forget that you need to add a signature here next time, and things like that. So it's really resubmittal instructions that you could put here. So Pam will be able to see this list coordinated together, and she can also make the ultimate decision here. So if reviewers didn't do that step, or there's contradicting instructions or something like that in here, she can go through and really finalize and firm this up so that when Bob gets notified that the review failed and he needs to re-upload files, that he can know exactly what needs to be re-uploaded in that process. Okay. So in this case, I know that we just talked through this with the review process and the markups and files being failed and all of that. Just to simplify it, because I think you can go and see through how we would do this on resubmittal and back and forth, we're going to pretend that we're at the point where this is approved. So the files are approved, the plan reviews are approved. Pam will have a way in here once again where she can email the different contacts and let them know that they can proceed to the next step. So she can send that out, and then once again, Bob gets that notification telling him something's been approved, and if we need to direct him to CSS to do something like pay fees or look at those files or anything like that, then he'll have the same capability here as well. Okay. So let me catch up on a few other questions, and then we'll kind of wrap it up, and I'll open up to more questions at the end too. Let me see. So can PAM coordinator be a group of people that get the email rather than one person? So that's come up a few times. Right now, PAM coordinator, she is the assigned to on the permit or plan case. So whoever you have in that assigned to field is who would have insight into this in the case manager piece of it. I think that works well for a number of jurisdictions out there. However, we do have an item on our backlog that I hope we can get to the first half of this year. It will depend on how it goes, where instead you can assign those tasks like the new files task to a group of people instead of it just going to be assigned to. So I think that would take care of what you're looking for there. What if you don't have a PAM coordinator? The people who coordinate our counter intake staff working in the back office, that's fine. So I think that this whole process works a lot better, and there's a lot of benefit added. If you do have someone who is, you know, I am the person who is truly going to manage this whole permitter plan from start to finish throughout the review process. Jurisdictions have moved that way, I think, in an effort to provide better customer service, that there's one consistent point of contact for that permitter plan, for that applicant to keep track of. But if you don't have someone who's that one assigned to, I think that's where the roadmap item we have in the future of being able to assign that task to a group of people would be really helpful. The expedited flags, so you saw that in a couple of the mock-ups. I don't know, like right here, you can see the expedited flag. We explored that. We honestly took that out of the first version of it. We had explored the idea of when someone mostly like either pays to expedite a plan review, or when the city just has some special interests around it to expedite that plan review, being able to flag that record and see that so you can prioritize that work. We still think that that's a really valid use case, but it didn't seem to be as important as some of the other items we were working on, especially if you just readjust the due date, you'd be able to prioritize the date that way. So that's a future idea. Hopefully we'll be able to flesh that out. Okay. Well, Steve Supervisor, I like the name of that, have access to see what stage the plan reviews are at. That is absolutely one of our goals here. I don't have that worked into this process that I'm showing you guys today, but we hope to have some stuff for you guys around that really soon, so that a supervisor, someone can see what stage the review has been in, and we're really interested into digging into some good metrics for you guys. A common metric that we hear asked for that people want some good insight into is, you know, how long has this plan review taken? But within that, how much of that time were we spent waiting for materials from the applicant versus how long we were working on that review too? And even getting a little bit more granular into that in terms of saying, well, it took, you know, just to get the plan reviews routed, it took 5 days, and then the review took 20 days or something like that. So getting those metrics is a huge piece for us. Does eReview allow customized workflows? So I'm not sure exactly how to answer that question, but Just to clarify, what I walked through today is an example of that end-to-end process that we're trying to establish to support true electronic plan review and not just doing reviews and saying that's an electronic plan review process. There's various workflows of how you could go about using this with kind of the same intention, I guess, behind it. We also, more literally, still support all of the workflows that you configure in EnerGov today. So the actual workflow piece in EnerGov today, we still support. The biggest changes that we would want to make sure we move towards is, once again, just having one active submittal in the workflow at a time. And then I also know that there are some clients who still have like a permit, and then they create a plan case so that they can have the submittal, and then that moves the permit forward. That process is still supported, but I think it would be a little bit easier if you put the submittal directly on the case that you're working with. So I had mentioned that the review letter could be generated, and please explain. The review letter, I get a lot of different feedback around how different people do have a review letter. First of all, in here, during that case manager screen or even the review screen, both the case manager and the reviewer will be able to upload more files to the screen as well. So if you want to manually create a letter on the side and then upload it here, you can do that, and that will be available online. I've also heard of some jurisdictions, and I know that this isn't comfortable or available for everyone, but I've heard of some places getting away of having a formal letter that is sent out, and instead they rely on the actual content that's being generated on the PDF in combination with the review comments that are entered here. And all of that is visible online with CSS. So we could talk about ways that you could rely on that more than the actual review letter itself. So can a Bluebeam session remain open if there's a long duration between multiple item reviews and reviewers? Yes, Bluebeam sessions can stay open for quite a while. I forget, we do have a limit that they expire after a certain number of days, but it's quite a long time. We are making the decision that when that V1 of that review is done, we close the session and then restart a new session when those new files are in. So we are trying to break apart how long the sessions are open between the different versions. Tyler, content management integration with EnerGov today, is there anything we should be aware of? So one thing that we didn't get to chat about that much in here is that I probably can't get to a good place to show you it, but when you, and this was something that a lot of clients had a lot of feedback around, is that having the eReviews file area and the attachment area was creating a lot of problems for jurisdictions. One of the main problems with that is that when people submit files online in CSS, during the application process, those files had always gone to attachments. You had to open up the eReview portal online to actually submit them to go to the eReviews area. The other problem with that is that once you have the files in the eReview area and you complete them, it doesn't tie into TCM, and it doesn't tie into what you can see in IG Inspect. So when the files first of all, when the files come in through CSS, there's now options to get those files directly into the eReview area. And then also at the end of the process, when you say this is the final plan, and we are good, and this is the one that we approve, when you say that, it will move to attachments, and that is going to pick up TCM. And also make it available in IG Inspect. So it makes that whole process, if you're using TCM, a lot easier with the new eReviews process. I'm trying to get through a couple more questions, and then I do have a few few last minute thoughts at the end too. So I'm skipping through because I think some of these questions I answered already. Okay, so I'm starting to get into some questions about when this will be released. So let me go ahead and jump ahead to some additional thoughts, and then I'll revisit the rest of the questions on the list. Just wanted to really once again re-emphasize this whole process that we're really trying to build a workflow using these new tools in Case Manager with Bluebeam sessions, et cetera, to facilitate taking that paper process to electronic without losing all of the actual process around it that various jurisdictions have implemented today. For all of this to work, there's a number of different components to use. The first is CSS. So you can, if for some reason you're not ready to allow people to submit plans online yet or their whole application online yet, you can scale CSS up or down to meet your needs here. But ideally, you would be able to use CSS, and they're going to have 2 different releases coming out that will support this new eReviews process. The first is right around the corner. I don't know the exact date on it. But it will essentially allow from online you to be able to upload files directly into the eReview file project area and also to see the results of plan review today. So that release of CSS will replace really having to have that additional eReview portal online. We will also be releasing a system settings app. This is where we have some different configuration options available to administrators, where you can say this is how we want those tasks that Pam gets in terms of new files task, review approved submittal and review failed submittal, those tasks, how you want them to generate, which submittals you want them to generate, who they're being assigned to. So there's some different settings there, and there's also quite a few settings around how you require files for people to submit online. So you'll have to decide, do we want just one big category for people to submit files to, or do we want 5, and what instructions do we want to put in there, and do we just accept one file for that requirement, or will we allow them to submit as many files as they want to for that requirement? So that's what the system settings app will allow you to do. The Case Manager app is the piece that Pam was in most of the time. So that's really that plan review coordinator where they're able to get a sense of what reviews are in progress, their tasks and their workload, and just kind of manage the intake and outtake of electronic plan review. The Manage My Reviews app, which is geared towards Patrick Reviewer for him to prioritize his work. And then Bluebeam Studio Prime and Review, which is the actual markup tool. So it's really these bottom 3 that the users would interact with the most on a day-to-day basis, and then obviously CSS for the applicant. So all that's getting to the timeline. We are looking to complete the development of eReviews by the end of March, which means that early April we would be starting the early adopter program. If you are interested in being an early adopter, please feel free to contact me. I've been in touch with a couple of you guys already. I think being an early adopter or just moving to this electronic plan review process in general, first of all, it would be very helpful for us to work with as many clients as possible. So that's great. I would say that just my experience working with eReviews over the last year, even in more of the design phase of all of this, is that just the nature of reviews, I think, makes things a little bit more, I think there needs to be good business processes in place with it, and it might mean changing some existing business processes. It probably means making sure that you have good Bluebeam best practices. It's not something that we can just give you software and it will magically make the world better, although that's what we would love for it to do. It's probably going to take a lot of collaboration with us that we are so eager to partner with you guys on, to keep reiterating, but then also to get the processes in place to really move towards electronic plan review. And then we also, for general availability, I hope to have that out within a couple of months of the early adopter program. But I'm not committing to an exact time right now because I want to see what the feedback is like from early adopters before we make that final decision. But that's the timeline around it. And then a couple of other pieces about how to get ready for this. First of all, using Bluebeam and starting to at least talk about, if you haven't, and I know that there's people on the phone who already use Bluebeam and already have best practices. If you haven't done that yet, that's a really great place to start. It doesn't require any EnerGov upgrades to get that or to start working through it. But I think that that it's a piece where I've talked to people who have implemented electronic plan reviews using EnerGov or not. They kind of recommend doing it in baby steps. So, you know, let's get reviewers used to Bluebeam. You can always, for the time being, if you have one or two projects that you want to try electronic plan review with, you can try doing that with Bluebeam sessions manually right now. It would not have the integration to EnerGov out there, but that's really great to get some training and get the reviewers used to that software if they're not used to it yet. Having some conversations around file requirements for various types of applications is really good. I've talked to a few jurisdictions where they're just moving to an electronic plan review process, and they're trying to decide, kind of like I said earlier, am I wanting to have people submit one big file? Do I want it to be a couple individual files? How granular do you want to get with that? My recommendation is to stay somewhat in the middle. So don't necessarily have people upload one page as a file, but if they're uploading something that's 100 pages, how could you break that down a little bit with different file requirements out there? And then the case manager concept, which a lot of the questions that I've gotten through this webinar have been about case manager. And I do think that's something that not everybody has that person in place. And I think it's worth just kind of asking if that's something that you feel like your jurisdiction has. Maybe people are already doing this and you guys don't see it. Do you guys envision this as being one person for one permit or plan case who could truly be that case manager to provide that great customer service? Or is it going to be a group of people, and kind of how do you want to approach that at your jurisdiction? I think that those conversations, started working around those things, regardless of the EnerGov software, would be a really great step to get ready for the new eReviews. So I do want to thank you guys. I'm going to take the remaining time here and see how many of these questions I can get to. There were quite a few that were asked, but if people need to drop off, that's understandable too. And once again, thank you guys for your time. And this is really about giving that high-level overview about this new eReview process. We will absolutely dive into this in more depth with you guys. We'll show you the software in depth, and we'll have more training and webinars on it as well. All right, so I'm going to keep answering these questions. Can reminder emails to the reviewer be automated? That is something that we're looking at. Our strategy right now, I know that reminder emails are important, and yes, that's something that we want to do. We do not have it right now. Our goal for the time being is that if you can have reviewers who are on a daily basis looking at their Manage My Review screen, and it shows them what's upcoming and what's overdue, then that cuts down on the amount of emails and the amount of different ways that they're being notified that something's upcoming due. So that's the strategy for the time being. I know that there's still ways that we want to automate to remind people of things that are upcoming due. So we will evaluate that in the future as well. What is the maximum file size which can be uploaded? We're working to see if we can have some best practices to provide you guys around file sizes. We actually did a lot of development work. It's a file transfer API, and what it does is when people are uploading files from CSS and you're trying to get them into EnerGov, it kind of changes that process of how we're uploading those files. And we made some changes there, so it kind of sends small pieces of the files to us in chunks instead of all at once, to cut down on errors and to make it perform better. So I think with that, the file sizes and having issues with people uploading huge files, I don't know if those same struggles are there, but we'll be working on some best practices with you all. Something that I have learned, that's kind of a side note from that, is when you actually have a document that someone brought into you and you scan it, those are the files that tend to be the largest. And they're also complicated because you're actually losing some data. Whereas if someone had created a PDF document and sent that to you, there's more data that you get from that PDF document than just the drawing on it. So the best practice that we're starting to see is that when possible, which I know isn't possible for anyone, but we want to encourage the use of true electronic documents that originated in a PDF as opposed to scanned in documents, once again, where possible. When renaming a file, does the file need to be downloaded first, renamed, and then re-uploaded? No, in current EnerGov that is true, but we are adding a feature in here where you'll just be able to say, I want to edit the file name, and you'll be able to rename the file. You won't be able to change the name of like the extension. So .pdf you won't be able to touch, but you can rename the actual file name itself without downloading it first. Okay. Do Bluebeam tools allow markup comments to add attachments such as a separate PDF detail? I'm not sure if it allows that or not. I haven't played with it. I'm interpreting that to mean that I would be in Bluebeam session and adding a comment and then attaching a PDF to that comment maybe. I haven't played with that in depth, but we might have other people who would be able to help answer that. So if any of you guys on the call have done that before or know the answer to it, feel free to type in the chat and I'll read it back to you guys when I find out. Can you restrict documents uploaded to eReviews internally from not being visible externally? So we will still, we'll streamline the process of at the end of the review right now. At the end of the review, someone has to go into the eReview project and they have to say, okay, I'm now releasing this so that people can see it online. We will still essentially have that functionality. You won't see it in the same way, so it will feel a lot easier to you, and you won't have, hopefully you won't forget to do that. But I think from that functionality, you would be able to hide stuff from showing up online. And once again, if it is a draft of a review letter or something like that, and you're uploading it directly to attachments, you can use attachment groups to control the privacy around that as well. But eReview files in general cannot be visible online until you guys take steps to say, yes, we want this to show up online. Can a Bluebeam session opened by Pam be closed by anyone else? So if you use Bluebeam sessions right now, one thing that I've heard is a little bit problematic with them is that the person who created the session has to be the person who closes the session. And that can be a problem if Pam is on vacation or out sick. The way that we're doing this with the integration is that EnerGov is the one closing the Bluebeam session, so it is not dependent on Pam being the one closing the session. It can really be anyone through EnerGov automation, really, that does that. And once again, that session is closed automatically when all of the reviewers are done with their review. And we do have a way, if, just kind of through error handling and if for some reason something fails in that process, where you can manually close the session from an EnerGov as well. And it doesn't have to be Pam who does that. Yes, so in a session, it will be one session equals one submittal, and you can have multiple item reviews in that submittal. So once again, we're trying to move to this wherever we can, at least for right now, to try to have one active submittal in a workflow at a time. And I know that there's business cases where that can't be achieved, but for right now, that's what we will support. And one thing that we did to help with that as well is that right now we have a geo rule where you can use GIS information to say, hey, this is in a flood zone or whatever zone, therefore we want to include an additional review. But right now, it is only supported through submittals. So you can use a geo rule to add a submittal. But in the future, I think it's actually in some of the releases right now, you'll be able to have a geo rule that adds an item review to an existing submittal. So that should hopefully help with that a little bit too. Let me see what else. Will the final approval utilize digital stamps and signatures? Bluebeam does have digital stamps that I know a number of jurisdictions use instead of a paper, a stamp that you would put on paper. So I feel like I haven't dug into that a ton, but I know that they're out there, and I know that other jurisdictions have been comfortable using that digital stamp as their stamp of approval for that final document. Bluebeam also has some signature tools as well. I'm hesitant to answer how we're going to approach that long term, but I would say that Bluebeam does have signature controls in there. It confirms both the content that you're signing and who's actually signing it, and it protects the document, so if someone else goes in and makes a change or has permission to do that, then it would invalidate that signature, but hopefully it would prevent that signature from the change being made once it's signed. So they do have tools around that, but I don't know exactly how that will tie into EnerGov long term. So what are the challenges with multiple sessions? Oh, I lost the question. What are the challenges of multiple sessions with Bluebeam session? I don't think one submittal will ever be sufficient for my jurisdiction. Like I said, I think that after we get this first version out, we will see what we can do to add multiple submittals in Bluebeam at a time. It just complicates the whole workflow process a little bit more. Is the realistic answer to it, is that when that new file task comes in, you have to then decide, well, which ones of these files am I sending to this Bluebeam session, and which ones of these files am I sending to this other Bluebeam session? And we did a round of user testing around that, and it just didn't resonate with people off the board. And it also means that when that submittal fails, you're getting multiple failed submittal tasks and approved submittal tasks. So it was just a layer of complexity that as we were trying to figure this out, we felt like we could do one submittal at a time and it would be cleaner. And that being said, and Greg is the one who asked this question, if that's something that is really troublesome to you, please reach out to me individually, because I'd also like to learn more about the business processes around that, so we can make sure that the software solution that we'll explore in the future truly supports that business process. Does the customer need to subscribe to Bluebeam? No. A lot of your customers will likely have Bluebeam, but they do not have to have any sort of Bluebeam license or anything like that to see the final PDF and comments that you get back. will best practices and procedures be available to other users? So I'm going to be working with the EnerGov implementation team and some folks at Bluebeam as well to see what sort of best practices and procedures we can start providing to clients. However, that's something that we would really love to collaborate with you guys on. I feel like there's no one way that anyone can come out and say, hey, do this for eReviews and you'll be set. I think it will take kind of a learning curve there. So if any of you guys are interested in being early adopters, once again, we will try to provide that as much as possible, but we'll also be counting on you guys to learn with us, and we'll help get that feedback and present it to people in the future as well. Is there a version where this will be available and the date? So kind of going back to that, we're working on the actual back office version of EnerGov that you will need to be on to get this new plan review and these new pieces of functionality there. So I don't have the specific version, and we talked a little bit about the dates. So I think you guys are good there. Is there a way to reopen a session that was closed inadvertently? I'll have to research that. I'm not 100% sure if there is or not. But we do have different ways in there that you can kind of manage and troubleshoot things that happen with Bluebeam, so we can dig into that. Can a session be reopened? Similar question. I don't think you can reopen the session. I will double check and kind of see how that works. I think once the reviewer has actually marks the review as being complete and pass or fail, whichever way they say it, I think that if other reviewers have done that too, at that point the session's closed. Now you could start another session to add that comment. You could also probably have a little bit of a workaround where that person opens up the PDF and does a markup and then saves that as the new file. So there's some ways you could probably do that, but hopefully that won't happen all that often. Will there be a users group forum to discuss topics? I would love that. I think eReviews, once again, you have to expect a little bit of chaos with it, and there's a lot of different business processes that we're working on establishing here. So we would love to have some ongoing conversations. I will tell you that the local user groups, in terms of the different regions, if you're not plugged into those, I think that will be a really great place where hopefully at least a couple jurisdictions in each area start adopting this and can help provide that information. Bluebeam also has a user group. They have it for individual like geographic areas, but then they also have one specifically for local governments to join to hear best practices and have discussion topics there too. So from the EnerGov user groups and from Bluebeam, I think you should be good, but we'll be working on ways to help make sure that you guys have support in rolling this out. I think that is it in terms of all of the questions that I'm seeing here. If I missed something, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at all. And once again, thank you guys so much for your time. I know that electronic plan reviews can be a lot, but I hope you're excited about the overall premise of this new eReviews, and we look forward to getting you guys more educated about it and up and running with it soon. So thank you all, and have a good rest of your day.